I'm with Susan Diamond. We've been talking about SE a little bit. They're both INTPs. I'm an ESTP, so we've got very different experiences with extroverted sensing. Um, Socionics Model G explains it more in depth than anything else I've heard of, and this model divides it into two different types of extroverted sensation: power sensing of subordination and power sensing of resistance. Subordination is SE, if you've ever seen it with a little minus sign afterwards, and power sensing of resistance is SE plus. Diamond, do you recall what types are in each group? Which types use SC minus and which use SE plus?
Yep, so the negative SE types are your type, so ESTP, my type, which is INTP, ENFP, ISFP, and of course the four duals, so that would be ESFJ, ISTJ, INFJ, and ENTJ. And of course the other 8 types use the positive charge, the power sensing of resistance.
So these types all have their sensations stacked in way different places. The key about plus and minus isn't how good you are with using SC, it's about how you use it. So even though
the type of information that it gives you.
Right.
That's about the type of information it gives you. So
even though I'm an SE Dom and you two are both SE Polar, we still fundamentally experience the same sort of style of SE.
Yeah.
Is that why Susie's so gangster?
I wouldn't even know.
So Diamond, I don't know if you have. Can you just sum up in a nutshell what the difference between the two styles are, and then we'll kind of get more into that. But just in brief, what's the difference?
Right, and you feel free to pick up anything that I may have left off or.
I always do.
Right. So power sensing of subordination is noticing both strength and weakness, because you got to remember, SE is about recognizing, it's about perceiving presence, and presence is in the form of force, because things that don't have any force at all don't exist as far as SE is concerned, of course, and things that have some level of force do have existence, at least as far as force goes. They have forceful existence. And 1 second, I have to plug my laptop in.
So SE minus is
the power sensing of subordination. So basically, it's where you notice where force is at, but then you quickly tune into the opposite of that, which is where force is lessened. In other words, where weakness is at. So you might be scanning, and you detect a weakness. And as soon as you detect a weakness, it almost increases strength in yourself, because it's almost like a size comparison.
So then, what would power sensing of resistance?
So resistance is about just noticing the strength in things. So in other words, it's more about like forcing yourself outwards, pushing yourself outwards, as opposed to noticing weaknesses, including weaknesses in yourself, and almost shrinking in a shadow. It's the opposite of shrinking in a shadow. So like once you notice a challenge, you grow bigger as that challenge grows bigger. It's almost you grow to resist, not try to push yourself on top, but more like to try to deflect something. So it's almost like projecting force outwards, whereas the negative charge is more about like noticing where strength is diminishing. And the reason why you want to notice where strength is diminishing with the negative charge is so that you can try to minimize that loss of strength, right? So you try to focus on it to try to make it go away as you subordinate things, so that you become the bigger one and they become like the smaller one. Right?
Hold on. You just got to shrink it down for me. You lost me a little bit there.
Okay.
So SE positive. Let's just do an example. There's an ESTP, me. We can just use the example we talked about earlier.
Oh yeah.
ESTP me is working with an ESFP.
Right.
And let's say in this situation, I see we both are SE dumb, so we both recognize the other one's sort of force or power sensing. Is that correct?
Yeah, presence in a way,
Okay.
like ability to take up territory because you have bigger force than other things around you. Yeah.
So then let's say that now we're conflicting and we both notice each other. How does he, as an SEE or an ESFP, how does he respond to me with his power sensing of resistance?
So he's going to try to resist you. In other words, like the example that you gave to me over the Facebook PM where you were saying that he kind of just ignores you, like you'll just yell at him. You know, in other words, you're yelling at him to try to find a weakness in him or to try to get him to turn towards you so that you have the power in the situation. But he's not going to let that happen. He's just going to resist you by ignoring you. And the more you yell, the more he resists. So it's more like the bigger he perceives you getting, the bigger he also grows to counteract you.
And I can say from experience in that I feel like since this is sort of a derivative of a real situation, I feel like this is very counter-phobic behavior.
Yeah.
So from my perspective, it feels like power sensing of resistance perceives a threat and feels threat. You know, its response to recognition of power is to expand, like a puffer fish. Whereas as an ESTP using, or any of us using SE negative, how are we going to do that differently than trying to puff up?
So the way that we're all of us 8 types, especially you, are going to use our SE is to try to gain power back in the situation. In other words, we notice power leaving, that is like our own power leaving, like in the situation that you gave, the example that you gave, your power was gone, you noticed a weakness, the guy ignoring you, so you are trying to gain power by getting him to turn to you and listen to you, right?
Well, no, well, you're kind of, I'm just talking about the first introduction. We just noticed each other, not even getting there.
Oh, okay. I see.
Right, and yeah.
Yeah, basically, like, it's more like we start to notice power diminishing, right? And what we will try to do is try to fill that void of power ourselves the way that we want. So let's say if there's some guy and he's really, really weak and he can't go up against that bigger guy over there, you're going to try to give him some kind of a weapon to make him bigger than that other guy he's trying to go up against, to make him be able to subordinate that guy who's now smaller compared to him.
Suze, right. Thoughts on either experiences? Or, I mean, I don't. So I'm about to explain my position or how I experience it, because the positioning differences is noticeable. What you're saying is relatable to me, but on sort of a different scale. So before,
right? Yeah, because see, I have polar SE, so I'm not going to have the type of examples that you have with your dominant SE.
Any thoughts, Suze?
Yeah, it's like I understand it, but for us, it kind of gets forced out of at least perceived necessity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't. I mean, I will notice a vacuum in power, you know, from a distance or where I'm not really involved.
Right.
And I might, from time to time, altruistically try to fill that just to return things to equilibrium. Mm-hmm. But sort of in the situation I was trying to get at is there's a bit of tension there already. And if I perceive tension, or if I'm, you know, just met somebody and there's sort of that, I don't know how to explain it, but there's just sort of a standoff you can feel with people sometimes. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
In that situation, I've noticed that SE positive becomes more assertive.
Yeah.
So we're standing on the line. They start pushing.
Yes.
I do not push until I see a spot.
Right, yeah, exactly. Until you see that weaker point.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm attacking more focused.
Yes, more focused.
And they're trying to get the first push in.
Exactly.
So the examples I use when I visualize this myself, I told Diamond, I visualize SE positive like a puffer fish. They get threatened and go out.
Yep.
And I vision SE negative like Venom, the Spider-Man character, who kind of just oozes in places and is there.
Yep.
So, and really that sums up the difference of the plus and minus sensations. That's, very in line with my experience. I'm sure that, I don't know.
I agree. Like, I think this is a really good short take on the whole thing, actually.
Anything else before we stop recording?
I don't know. I guess to wrap it up, like, I kind of like what you said about it's the same thing I always try to emphasize when I explain it to people is that yours is a bit more negative. SE is a bit more almost double-sided or like focused in a specific area because there are more like weaknesses showing up, right? Whereas like the power sensing of resistance, it's a bit less detailed view than that. It's more about just growing with what you perceive growing, So, but yeah, that's I think we hit the nail on the head as far as a short video goes.
Okay. I guess just one last thing. You had said that SE negative sees the power going out of themselves, and that probably has to do with where your SE lines up, because I don't feel that. I feel that there's pressure against me, and I feel like I'm literally just holding neutral. I'm just holding the line until I see a move, and then I push through there. I don't feel like I've lost anything. That
is so interesting that you say that, because the holding neutral is actually part of what creates my problem.
We're recording.
Oh, my!
So I don't know how much we want to get into our problems now.
Oh, okay. All right. We can end it here, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
I just had one thought, and that is what you said about like the power struggle and push and hold or whatever. Like the little perception of function that I can understand is like the SE digging your heels in. You know what I mean? Like
for our type of SE?
No, yeah, for our type of SE and like the weak SE in INTP, which is not really utilized much. But once it's there, it's like a break. It's like you're digging your heels in to resist whatever it is.
Yeah, and I've noticed with you, Suze, you're probably the least SE polarish girl, SE polar person I've met. You seem to not really have that.
Yeah, I think it has to do with 11 years experience of living with an ESTP.
What? And so when you're digging your heels in, are you waiting for an attack like I am? Because I'm just holding until I see the right opportunity. Or are you drawing the line and just making sure it doesn't get pushed?
It depends what I want from the situation. Most of the time it's just digging my heels in with no wish to do anything more, because I'm already in a very uncomfortable situation.
Is conflict uncomfortable for you?
It depends what kind of conflict, because not all conflict has a sensible SE element to it.
Generic detached conflict. You're in a fight with a stranger. Okay.
No problem.
Diamond, do you find conflict uncomfortable if it's not a real close,
It kind of depends, but yeah, I could definitely find it uncomfortable. Sometimes there are occasions where I might actually find the challenge kind of enjoyable. Like, in other words, because I'm going to win and I'm going to accomplish something, right? But if it's a situation where I'm like, oh shit, like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do here. And especially if my NE gets involved and tries to give me like thousands of possibilities as to what could go wrong, and I start being ungrounded, then that's when it becomes very uncomfortable.
Okay, see, the way I see it is that it's a rush if it's in an area where I'm kind of familiar, someone who communicates on a similar level. But for
Right,
example,
exactly.
if we're talking to an ESFP, where I perceive that the person isn't understanding anything coming out of my mouth, and I get like some very uncomfortable SE resistance, it doesn't matter. It's like uncomfortable from the get-go.
Yeah. Like, the thing with ESFPs and me is, like, I mean, I've gotten along with members of all the types, including ESFPs, but sometimes I feel like I don't know how to approach them, because every time I try to approach, I just get resisted, and I don't always know why.
I work in construction, and I work with a lot of SC users, including several ESFPs. A lot of them. I was married to one, and I can answer that. ESFPs bond first. They make a connection first, then follow through. If they can't make that connection, if they don't feel like they've made that connection to you, then they're going. It feels like, because everyone assumes that people are just like them. So if they're trying to connect first, but they're not getting connection back, that feels standoffish. Just
Right.
like you're trying to talk to one, but they're not listening to your words, they feel standoffish. So it's really just
Exactly.
an offset of first contact.
Yeah, that's a really good point, honestly.
And it's actually pretty simple to establish that, because you can, if it doesn't even have to be that believable. If you show that you're trying to be friendly, normally that the attempt is good enough.
Yeah, and that's actually what's worked with me, for me, with the ESFP that I had in mind that I've actually gotten along with. I haven't talked to her in a while, but like, that's exactly what did it. Is like, we ended up communicating about a common interest, which is like hiking, right? Like outdoor stuff. And I mean, like, then it became like a much more comfortable and like also friendly sort of situation, right?